Hello and welcome back to OCD Coded. I'm Erin Brown, licensed marriage and family therapist and mental health counselor, here to help you learn how to turn your OCD into a superpower. Today we are talking about uh, contamination OCD type of OCD, and it's a more common known one, kind of known or most commonly associated with the hand washing and the kind of germ phobia kind of part of it, which actually phobias are a big part of OCD and very much an overlap. And so we'll definitely talk about that in another video to come. But um, for today, really breaking down the contamination type of OCD and kind of how to start working with it differently, how to identify it, and then how to work with it different. And so, it's really thinking about, so germ contamination is a great place to start and thinking about it in more of almost a physical way, but that also thinking of it as contamination of feelings is something I see a lot with clients, and that it's, being either afraid of being contaminated by their feelings or kind of feeling like having to feel the feeling all the way or feeling it perfectly or feeling the feeling in some kind of like if I just process it right, maybe it'll go away kind of thing, obsession that ends up being a compulsion of feeling the feeling again and again or trying to feel the feeling again and again as that compulsion to reduce this distress of the unknown. And so, it helps me to ask myself sometimes, like, is there a fear there? And trying to identify that fear and what's the underlying fear. And those are some ERP techniques or exposure response prevention techniques, which is one of the best and well researched also, options for treating OCD. And I think it's a great place to start with things. And it's more of a top down, like focusing on symptoms and doing that and looking at the underlying fear that's from there. And then I think EMDR and those kind of therapies really work as a bottom up kind of approach of addressing the underlying beliefs that are really associated with these things. And that together, it's really powerful. But that finding what works for you is the most important thing. And that's what's so hard because how OCD can be called the doubting disease. It's so hard for the person to trust themselves and to feel like, is this normal? Is this not? What am I like? And then just feeling so overwhelmed by that urgent feeling that OCD gives about, needing to feel like, oh my gosh, if I don't do something right now, something bad's going to happen. If I don't wash my hands right now, I'm going to get sick. Or if I don't feel this feeling all the way, then I'll never feel happy again. Or, if I feel this feeling at all, that means I'm weak and those kind of things. And, you can see how these can be thoughts that everyone may have had at some point, or that can be common as, another way of saying that. But that also with OCD, it just really, it's kind of, it seems to me that at first the person kind of knows that these beliefs aren't true. And maybe they know that the whole time, in different ways, but that like over time, because the thought comes again and again and again, it just, and the feeling of urgency that comes with it, it just starts to feel more and more true or more and more inevitable, I guess is another word for it, or, just like something's going to have to give with this. And it can be really hard to focus attention somewhere else and sit in that discomfort of the unknown um, about, that I can do this, I can be okay. And that is, not something you ever want to say quite like that, like, oh, just calm down, or you could do this, just stop. Even though, like, well, understanding that people are just trying to help, but also it's not helpful. So as I practice saying to, the different parts of me also, I'm like, thank you. I know you're trying to help OCD. It's not helping right now. Or like, okay, OCD, here's something I really need to do, like perfectly. Let's get, come here, let's do this together. And so, that's some of that IFS or internal family systems parts work that we'll definitely talk about more also in other videos. But for coming back to contamination form of OCD, it's really, um, like that walking, identifying that underlying fear is such a good first part of that, of, that how so much fear comes down to, um, really that all fear is fear of death is one way of looking at it and, kind of go straight to it and be direct, but that's kind of what we're trying to identify also that, that I can do this and that what is my fear and that, calling it walking down the fear ladder in that way of, you know, okay, so if this thing happened, you know, what would be so bad? And it's so hard to do, and it's a very advanced skill. But that is one thing to start thinking about with how it might play out. And so that is, the purpose of all of that is to try to identify the fear and to try to see that and remind yourself that you can handle it, that even if some of these fears came true, like that they're always, I try to stay away from always or never, but it's worse in our head. But, again, we can't just do that uh, by pretending it's not there or by staring at it. So the goal is to kind of walk gently toward it and to kind of really try to analyze our fears. Like, what am I, you know, what makes this so scary? What am I really afraid is going to happen? So if this happens, then what happens next? And then what happens next? And so another way I call as playing out the tape, but that, that we're trying to, I can only usually go a couple levels at the same time, but then so again, well, that'll be something to think about, but just really identifying those underlying fears and thinking about how fear of feeling feelings is a big one. And the thoughts and feelings and belief part is so much harder to identify because it's not tangible. And so starting to think about your thoughts, and that's, can be really powerful that we don't have to believe every thought that we have. And, that idea of can I just notice and observe my thoughts and feelings without judging them and really practice that first. And I think of when people try to, take time off of work or other things like that also, but then find where they can't relax or shut their brain off. And with OCD, that can be extra hard. And so, the part of it is practicing a little bit every day. And I think of meditation as, walking or that it doesn't have to be sitting there, silently, that it can be just saying, like being the non-judgmental observer of our thoughts and feelings and how much that really helps. And so, like being able to identify what your fears are and really trying to just notice them without judging them, notice them without, you know, um, trying to just be curious is really the goal that we're going for. Can I be curious about my thoughts and my feelings? And can I focus on what I'm doing well? And that is such an important part and something we'll talk about, again. And I do feel like sometimes I end up repeating myself about certain things, and those are the things that are important. But I always want to also, get any feedback and answer any questions that people may have about these different parts of it and know that these are, suggestions. These are some things that have worked for me, but what really helps is finding what works for you and, knowing that none of this is like, that this comes from some of my personal experience and some of my knowledge in all of these different ways, and that the goal of all of this is not to give you any direct advice or directives, but these are suggestions and or kind of outlines of how I did it so that you can learn how to do it in the way that feels good to you. And I think, again, that pain of being misunderstood is such a large part of OCD, and that my goal, the being able to understand ourselves is so important. And then, we can work on the understanding others part, but like really working to understand ourselves and being able to trust ourselves instead of doubt all the time is my ultimate goal to help you learn how to do. So, if there's something you want help understanding, or if you want to, have your voice be heard, or, to be seen in that way, or, and to be understood more, I would love to hear your feedback. And until next time, I hope you have a great week. Talk to you then. Bye.